welcome back to the podcast today. Today we have a special guest, Kurt Summers, good friend of mine and fellow filmmaker, and also former Marine, crash, fire, rescue. Kurt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're gonna just dive right into it. Kurt, we're gonna go right back into your history. So, what got you into the Marine Corps, and why did you want to do crash, fire, rescue?
So I was just ready to leave home, kind of that standard, probably pretty cliche, ready to get out of home and just go experience life somehow. And I had a friend that was leaving for boot camp in a few months, and I was like, hey, I'm going with you. And so we left in March. Graduated late May, and I didn't want to be crash fire rescue. All my friends that I knew were infantry, and none of them seemed like they were having a good time. So I was like, hey, my ASVAB is really good. Let's just see what else I can do. And so I went with a 7,000 series job, which is a wing job. And I honestly thought I was going to be like, my goal was to be a UAV mechanic, because I thought that would be a cool job to do once I got out of, because I was never going to do it for more than 4 years. I just wanted something that would set me up for life afterwards, right? And so I was like, oh, UAV mechanic, that might be cool and lead to some cool path down the road. Well, didn't end up getting that. I thought I was going to be ordnance, which wouldn't have been a good after military job. But in boot camp in week 11 or whatever, when they read your job off, my name got down, Summers 7051, crash fire rescue. No idea what that was. And then a lot of guys in boot camp are like, oh, they're like PJs, blah, blah, blah. Like they thought crash fire rescue was like a PJ or like a smoke jumper or something.
Yeah.
And turns out it was a really cool job. You get to go spend, I think we spent like 3 or 4 months at MOS school in the butthole of Texas, San Angelo, at the DoD Fire Academy. And with that goal in mind of having a job after the military, doesn't really get much better than that, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially since a lot of the Marines that I know, a lot of infantry guys, they get the adrenaline rush and go into firefighting. That's pretty common. I got a bunch of buddies that they're on the East Coast, and turned into like New York firefighters, which are like the tier 1 units of like firefighters. Like, it's insane. Like, it's a wild job. So you were in boot camp. So you just went under general contract? Is that where you were like fucking spin the dice, or was it for 7,000 series?
7,000 series was my thing, and that kind of happens a lot. Is most guys will think they're getting crash fire rescue jobs, and they'll end up as ordnance guys. And I was just the opposite of that, because that's what the numbers needed at the time, I guess.
Oh, okay. Nice. So where were you stationed at?
I was lucky, and I got to go to K-Bay out in Hawaii. Worked at McCass Marine Corps Air Station in Hawaii.
Hell yeah. I was stationed out there, for the listeners as well, from 2005, 2009. There was one guy from my boot camp. He went crash fire rescue. It was really weird. I remember seeing him, and then I got done with my third deployment, and I was like checking out. It was like my last day. Like, it was the day before I was like done. And I was driving, and I saw him, or I was walking to the PX or whatever. I don't know, to the the shop at, or to the liquor store. I can't remember what we called that one. Yeah, I was just walking around, and I saw him. I was like, holy shit, man. Like, dude, it's been like 3.5 years, and he's like, how'd it go? And I was like, 3 combat deployments. And he was like, oh my God. And then he was crash fire rescue, or the fire department, whatever, And he was like, oh, I was like, how was it for you? He's like, it's pretty good. It's a good gig. It's chill. He's like, we don't do formations. It's actually just like a regular job. And I was like, fuck you, man.
Yeah.
But how was life in Hawaii?
It was good. I got to a brand new unit, MWSD 24, which is the support unit for the wing. So all the squadrons of aircraft have a support unit, and that's what mine was. So in crash fire rescue, you either go to a wing unit, which is the unit that will deploy with the squadrons. or you go to an air station, or you go to the flight line to be on the fire station that's at the flight line. So I was in the wing unit. It was brand new. Like I said, I think I just missed being a plank holder, which means you're like one of the first 50 people there or whatever. You get this like certificate that you helped stand up the unit. I think I was like in the first, from me being the Buddhist boot to the CO, there was like 60 people when I got there.
Before we keep going with the podcast, I want to drop this week's discount code for 9line Apparel. We're not just a brand, we're a lifestyle that celebrates the spirit of freedom, courage, and American values. Go check out the new Grand Theft Auto design and other awesome patriotic gear, including hoodies, glassware, flags, jackets, hats, patches, and way more. All material is ethically sourced, so every shirt you buy is free of slave labor. As a veteran-owned and operated company, we take pride in giving back to those who served. Your purchase helps contribute to charitable initiatives supporting veterans and first responders. The episode's discount code is SUMMER20 for 20% off 9line Apparel products. SUMMER20. I say again, SUMMER20. Not 10, not 15, but 20% off. Not 25 because that's a bit excessive. So go to the store and go get your 20% off your next purchase. While you're at it, like, listen, and subscribe to the 9line podcast for future discount codes and more conversations with amazing guests like today. Now back to the podcast.
Got there, and we actually got to go spend a good amount of time at the station. Since we were new, there wasn't much to do, so the station just augmented us into their manpower. So I got to work 72, so 48-hour shifts and 72-hour shifts, which alternate on and off. So basically 2 times a month I was on a 72-hour Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. 2 times a month I was working that weekend. So basically I got a 72 every other weekend for like 6 months. And then we got to go do some field training and stuff like that. We were big enough by 2015, which was a year and a half into me being there, to go to Australia for like 3 months. Got to live in the outback and experience a little bit of that life of just having nothing and living in the dirt. But it was a good time, man. I knew that it wasn't going to get better than that. Like, I don't want to go to 29 Palms or, Beaufort or something. Like, it's not going to get better than Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what was that like? I mean, like your day to day, then what'd you guys do?
So a lot of it is like, if you're just at the wing doing stuff and you're just at your shop, you're not doing much. Like maybe you're doing some training, just standard firefighting stuff. You're checking out the truck, making sure all the stuff works, but you're at the wing. So you're just at your shop in K-Bay. Obviously if you're at a field training or if you're deployed, it's going to be much different. You're actually doing your job. So day-to-day life at the wing, it's not too crazy for crash fire rescue. But if you're on the flight line, then you're doing your job every day, right? You're checking out the truck. You guys are doing training, but you're also eating together. Every meal you're eating together. It's a legitimate fire department. Working out, training, maybe a little bit of hazing. I don't know. I'm not going to confirm or deny what might go on. But something that's cool about crash fire rescue, or maybe not cool, looking back on it's cool, but at the time it's not very cool. When there's like a hot airfield, typically there will be a truck out there on standby. So there will be 4 dudes in a truck, shoulder to shoulder, sitting there for 8, 10, 12 hours. I think in Australia, we were in the truck for like 16 hours a day. Just, in case something does happen. And, thankfully, typically it doesn't happen, but you want to be there if it does.
Mm-hmm. Weren't you guys involved in one of the crashes off of Hawaii?
Yeah. So, in May of 2015, an Osprey crashed. I believe the numbers were 23 on board. 2 ended up passing away. One, the crew chief, he was ejected and passed away immediately. And then other guy died from his brain swelling up in the hospital. And then January of 2016, so roughly 6 months later, 253s hit each other off the North Shore, and we were involved with the recovery of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's like, so that's kind of, I shouldn't say that's the action that you guys saw, but that's what they basically kind of trained you for.
Yeah, so yeah, like that's a good thing to like kind of bring up, I guess, is like when you're training for firefighting, you're like, you're training to put out the fire, working the hose, all that kind of stuff. Well, by the time we got to like the Osprey crash, for instance, it was in Bellows, so it was 30 minutes from base. So the local fire department had already responded by the time we got there. So one thing that comes after firefighting is the recovery of the aircraft, so they can salvage what they can salvage and maybe reuse. I don't think so, to be honest, but more importantly, so they can figure out what happened. And as crash fire rescue people, you're the only people qualified to be cutting on the bird. So we spent probably, I want to say 5 days, 7 days cutting up this aircraft with people from Boeing that built the Osprey. The Boeing people would be like, all right, we want this section, blah, blah, blah. And aircraft aren't made to be cut apart. So it was a lot of hard work. And then as far as the 53s that crashed off the North Shore, obviously they were underwater for, it was a long time before the aircrafts were found, several weeks, I think. But two of us, it wasn't myself, it was my sergeant and another Marine. They got put on board a vessel with the Navy, who recovered it off the bottom with divers. Obviously, they hooked it and craned it up. But like my sergeant and this other Marine had to like take the pilots out of their seats and stuff, and do the same thing as far as like removing the pieces that they wanted off of the aircraft that were still salvageable.
No shit. Yeah, that's wild, man. So then, what was the cause of the Osprey crash?
You can actually find videos of it on YouTube. It was just a brownout, and stuff got sucked into one of the engines, and you can see the video of the bird going down into the dust.
Yeah. Is that I know that's something that, I mean, that's well after my generation. I remember they were, I think, fielding the Ospreys in Camp Fallujah or Afghanistan. I can't remember. I know they used them in Afghanistan like right after I left in like 2010. But they were having issues for obviously like years and years and years. Is that something that you guys in the community talked about? Like these fucking Ospreys?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Out of the sky, or
yeah. I pretty several special operations guys just died, several weeks ago in an Osprey crash. It's like it still happens to this day.
Yes.
And that's definitely something that gets, if you find one of those posts, you'll certainly be able to like read the comments, and you'll just see all the people like, we need to put these out of service.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of those things. I remember one of my chief instructors at sniper school, he refused to get in one, and they would like test him out over on like the East Coast, and
right.
He's like, absolutely not. Like, absolutely not. Those things were like crashing left and right, and they were trying to like throw troops in it just to like weight capacities and testing, and it was just going sideways all the time.
Yeah.
But they eventually did. Obviously, they eventually fielded them, but yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a point of contention, I think, is the best way to put it for some people. And those are what's stationed in Hawaii now, is MV-22s.
Yeah. So they even have any of those 53s left, or is it mostly just all Ospreys?
Yeah. So I don't know if 53s are still in Hawaii, but they moved to a new model of the 53, the Kilo.
Oh, okay.
But I couldn't tell you if they're in Hawaii or not.
Okay. So then you did your 4 years and everything, and you had a fun time. What'd you do after that?
Yeah. So like, I think 2 or 3 weeks before I was actually like leaving Hawaii, I had been applying my last 6 months for federal firefighting jobs. So every military base has a fire department. Marine, Army, Air Force, they all have a structure fire department on them. Like Marines don't do structure stuff; it's only aircraft. So I had been applying to bases all around, just casting a wide net. And 2 or 3 weeks before I got out, I got a job offer at Lackland Air Force Base as a firefighter, a GS firefighter position. So I packed all my stuff up and sent it to San Antonio and started working for the Air Force as a civilian. And that's what I did from 20.
Nice. So what were you? No, I was going to say, go ahead.
That's what I did from 2017 to 2021. I was down in San Antonio.
Oh, nice. So where were you originally from, though? Because you're from somewhere else, right? You were from Texas.
So my dad's from Needles, California, out in the desert. That's where I'm at right now, actually. But pretty early in life, around 5th grade, I moved to Missouri, where my mom's from. And that's where I lived until I joined the military.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So living in Texas then, so was that a little bit kind of like Needles, California?
It's a lot more humid, and I wouldn't say it's a lot like Needles, no. Needles is very small. San Antonio's obviously one of the biggest cities. But temperature-wise, sure. Climate-wise.
I was going to say, climate-wise, I guess it would be as big as San Antonio. It's a massive city. But so you end up moving into San Antonio, Texas, and then what led you into, like said, your filmmaking path from there on out?
Yeah, so like 2015 or 2016, I was like getting into coffee, like drinking it in the mornings, and I ended up finding this company called Black Rifle Coffee, and I enjoyed their coffee. Like I started bringing a freaking what's it called? Not a French press. Oh my gosh, an AeroPress. It's like this little portable coffee maker, and I would use the AeroPress with the water heater from an MRE pack, and then I would make legitimate coffee while we were doing field training. And so in 2017, I got out. I moved to San Antonio. Well, literally, like within like 30 days of me being there, I learned that Black Rifle had also moved their headquarters to San Antonio. So I kind of just I was already in some groups that were involved with Black Rifle. Drinking Bros is a Black Rifle's, like the founders of Black Rifle started this group podcast. And I ended up just befriending some people that were also in the group, and that led to me working in customer service for Black Rifle while I was firefighting. So I did both. And then a few months into me doing that, the production assistant for Black Rifle, he ended up leaving. So they needed somebody, and just by word of mouth, me working on my marketing degree and me loving and understanding the brand, it like got my foot in the door, and that kind of got me into production stuff. Because before that, I had no clue about it, didn't ever even think about it, to be honest. But just started rolling with that, and not too long later, I met you.
I was going to say, I think I remember you when you might have already started doing PA work, but you were customer service, because I think it was like in the first few months I needed to get like some gear from you essentially, or like extra coffee or whatever. Yeah. And I remember having to contact you, and I think you were still in customer service, or were you already, and that would have been like August of 2020 or something like that. It might have been something like along those lines. Were you still working that, or were you a PA by that point?
I was probably a PA, but since I knew how to work the back end for orders and stuff, they had me do it for the whole time I was on the media team as well. I would just, anytime they needed orders, I handled those as well, because I could do it.
Yeah, yeah. So what was kind of like I think I know I walked in on one of their bigger productions. I think it was Vets versus Horror for Corridor. What was that kind of like? I mean, that's a crash course in filmmaking. You know what I mean? Especially moving on, like you're coming from a world that's like not media related at all. I mean, how was that, just observing and trying to figure all that stuff out?
I mean, it was awesome. Like that. That's how I learn best, is just by kind of like watching things and maybe like, playing around with it. If I have the opportunity to learn it that way, that's how I learn the best. So that was just me like drinking from a fire hose a little bit, but, soaking it in as well. Because I got to, I'd never even set up a light stand before. Obviously, it's not hard, but you get to learn it, and then you get to a point where you're just doing it, off of muscle memory, second nature. Knowing where things should go and what needs to be next, just to keep that, keep them off your back and, keep the production running smoothly, especially because me and Ronnie, who came on at the same time as I did, we did so much. Like we were the grease to the machine a lot of the times, I feel like, to be honest. Like it would have been a lot rougher, a lot more delayed if Ronnie or I weren't there to help. And that's, not me bragging about myself or anything, but I think that's the truth.
Yeah, well, PAs can be basically make or break a production. Because I know I could use PAs at some time. Like, God damn it, I wish I had somebody to help me, help me out on my stuff when I'm running solo. Or you just need someone to just go and get that extra stuff.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and being getting to see someone like Corridor, how they work, and one of my first things I did with Black Rifle, I think, was with Corridor. Yeah, it was. I forgot the names of the videos, though, to be honest. But
was that the one where they get into the big brawl?
Yeah,
because I think that was before I got there.
Yeah,
it was, and that it was the big fight, coffee fight, or something like that.
It was called Tactical 3 Loads is one of them, I think. Then there was a few more little skits they did while they were in town, and that's really cool. But to be honest, I had no idea who those guys were. And obviously they're massive in the YouTube space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what was one of your favorite productions on there? Because you did some fun ones, man. Like even the Predator, Vets versus Sci-Fi. That seemed pretty dope. That was before I got on.
Yeah, that was a good one, man. If I had to pick one, my favorite one, probably the Vets versus Horror. Those were always fun. I always got to play a part in them, a zombie or something. Yeah, I'd probably go with Vets versus Horror. Which one though? I don't know. Probably the second or third one. I think I helped on both of those.
Mm-hmm. You started working with them in 2018?
No, it would have been January of 2019. I think.
January 20. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were over there a little. Okay, about a year and a half longer than I was there. Okay, yeah, that's like I said, man. So going through that process, what made you want to take the leap then? Because obviously I was there, so ask you the questions of how you felt about it.
Oh, I just
but I remember you taking that leap when we were doing filming together and whatnot. And I know that was a big decision to jump from. It's a federal firefighting gig. So
yeah,
media.
But. So going back to leaving the Marine Corps and joining the Air Force not joining the Air Force, but working for the Air Force as a civilian, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be like a cakewalk. I'm going to love it. Cause like I said, I wasn't ever in the Marine Corps to, make a career out of it. But I got to San Antonio and I went from working 2 days on, 3 days off style schedule to working 1 day on, 1 day off at the Air Force. And I was just wasn't for me. The department was just, really old in age and they were set in their ways. And I'm just this young kid who I enjoy working out. I enjoyed training and none of that really happened there. So I became pretty miserable, to be honest. And then I found Black Rifle and I started doing all this cool stuff in my off time. Every single day I was doing something cool, I think. So I just fell in love with that. And I had never really had a job or a career that I cared about. I mean, obviously I was pretty young at the time. Not that I'm old now, but
Yeah.
I just I fell in love with it. And that's I was oh, I want to do this full time. And so the opportunity came for, hey, we want you to be here full time. So you're not gone every other day. And so I took that opportunity and ran with it.
Mm-hmm. Sweet, man. So like, what was your first big project that you jumped on?
With them, once I left.
Yeah.
Oh, obviously it was me.
Yeah. Once you started full time,
it was me and you going to Camp Pendleton for a recon sniper course, and then going up to Alaska for a week plus.
Hell yeah, bro! I set you up on that for that one
for sure.
I remember that too because I had done a few projects already, and I was like, I need a number two. Like it was just the amount of gear that I was lugging around and the amount of work I was doing was just like I need a PA.
Right.
I need a second cam, and Austin, as we both know, a good friend of ours, was one of the other main cinematographers there. So it was always fun getting all three of us together. But yeah, man, that was awesome having you on that recon sniper and then up to Alaska. Cause I think we were out for almost like 2.5 weeks on that one. That was like a add-on for favorite of Marty Scoveland over at the former Coffee or Die, wanting to get us to shoot footage with him before we took off to Alaska.
Right. And what a cool contrast of the trip too.
Yeah. Oh, it was nuts because we went from, I mean, you can explain it. What happened? We, from the PA's mouth.
We flew to San Diego, I think, for 3 days, right? And then we also had to pack gear for San Diego weather, Camp Pendleton. But in the same suitcase, you had to have stuff for Alaska, -40 degrees. So it was interesting. Probably won't ever do that again, like as far as packing that way. But we went straight from Camp Pendleton to Fairbanks, Alaska, and got to hang out with Mr. Jeff Reed.
Yeah, I know. That was, I remember we were prepping for that trip and I was like, we need to buy gear. Like this isn't a, for, let's just pack a few Black Rifle, branded,
hoodies,
light jackets or something, whatever the whoopee jackets. Yeah. Hoodies, this is a full on, Arctic, logistical, I won't say nightmare, but, logistical, powerhouse where we had to make sure we had everything we needed. I mean, I think me and you had the same outfit. I think we have Arctic Carhartts,
right?
and all that shit, and in the boots were mine were rated for -40 or something like that. And then hope praying to God the cameras didn't freeze, in the weather. And that was a blast. That was one of the best trips I ever took, and filming wise too. I mean, what we got out of that was phenomenal.
Incredible. Yeah.
So what was your favorite parts of that trip? Yeah. Go into detail, Kurt.
I mean, I don't think I'll ever experience going. How far did we go out into the wilderness? It was an hour or more, right?
Oh yeah, it was a few miles. Well, I shouldn't say a few miles, but I mean, we were dog mushing for 4 or 5 hours, I think.
Yeah,
on the Denali Highway too.
Yeah,
so it was. Yeah, we were out there. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, we parked the cars, unloaded the dogs and gear, and we went, a long ways into the bush, the Alaskan bush, and we dug out our tents. We set up camp, and then we stayed outside in the freezing cold because we didn't do our stove right or something, and so
I know. Oh my God, it was terrible. Well, the stove, we didn't have enough wood, and then or something. We didn't keep the wood going, and then it melted the ice underneath us, or the snow, and then it froze. So we basically slept on ice, and that was probably one of the most miserable nights that I've ever had. Sleeping in the cold. I think it might be the worst.
And you've had some miserable ones, I'm sure, for sure.
Dude, I have some very miserable nights, and the freezing of that was, God, it was so cold. I had to take my jacket and basically make a layer, And then I remember you were trying to keep the fire going in the in the stove, and dude, I got up to the coals. I was basically about to burn myself on the stove, and there was no heat. It was there's nothing coming out. It was so fucking cold.
Right.
God, I remember that. And then we all our water froze because we kept it on the outside. It like instantly froze. And, Jeff was like, obviously he'd been doing it a million times over, and he put everything in a cooler, like in one of those, Yeti coolers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like ingenious because it kept the water warm. That does like the opposite, and it's all insulated. And then we ate that soup he made, which was phenomenal.
I didn't
but
eat
then
it.
It was like, oh, dude, it was so good. And then I had to take a massive dump.
Exactly. That's why I didn't eat it.
Exactly. I know. Yeah. And I had to get up, and it was like one of those things like, can I make it till morning? No. And it was like -20, -25 out. And it was those things. I mean, you remember it. You step off the beaten trail. It's like your foot goes in like 3 feet of snow. Like, it was not compact. Oh, it was nuts, man. That was a rough night.
It was. Luckily,
and it just like woke up.
Luckily, we had like 1,200 hand warmers because I think that's how I stayed warm-ish.
Oh, I know. Yep, exactly. Yeah, I remember Austin got up and his like long lion's mane was like iced over, like all his.
Yep.
But that was awesome. It was so much fun. We got some great footage on that. That was one of the best projects that I've ever worked on or produced and directed. So
yeah, that
was a blast.
That award we won, I still never got my trophy.
Oh yeah, that's right. I can't remember who was that? That was
I don't know, Film Stream Festival or something.
That was. I remember what you're talking about though. Something like that. Yeah. So, yeah. So then, did that kind of, because I remember that was your first production, really like diving into it. Obviously you were on the other sets, but like you were pretty hands on with us, and I was having you run the A7 and getting your hands dirty with the cameras. So did you just then kind of take a shine to that?
Yeah.
I mean, because some people do are like, yeah, whatever. I don't really care about, because I know cinematographers that are gaffers, and they don't want to touch a camera. Mm-hmm. They want to put up light stands and do lights, but they don't care to do any kind of camera work. So did that kind of just that bug bite you where like, I want to do media, I want to keep telling stories or get that ball rolling?
Well, I think for me, like, and I remember I think it got announced in Alaska, or maybe it was just us three talking about like how I wanted to do stuff with BJ Baldwin, like trophy trucks. And I think it was just us talking about it one time. Mm. And so once Black Rifle brought him on and like BJ is like one of the first 5 people on Instagram that I followed, I think. So once Black Rifle became associated with him, like I was all in, like filming stuff like we did in Alaska, like that's once in a lifetime stuff. I'll always do that if the opportunity ever knocks. But for me, Motorsports really like locked it in for me because I got to. So that I think they brought him on early in the year after our Alaska trip sometime, but his first race with Black Rifle wasn't until August at Vegas to Reno. But I got to go film that race because I don't know that anybody really cared about his actual racing as much as I did, because I would be like a month ahead, be like, hey, he's got a race in a month. Can I go? And fortunately, every time they told me, yes, you can go. So I got to go film a race. I had never chased a desert race before. Vegas to Reno was my first one, and that's the longest point-to-point desert race in the United States. It's 500 miles. It takes about 8 hours for the fastest guys. So me and Paul went, and our friend Paul was the guy in charge of Motorsports at the time for Black Rifle. We went and chased this race, and it was incredible. It was there aren't many things in life that make me feel like a kid, I guess, when I'm doing it, but standing next to a track as trophy trucks go by, it's definitely one of those things for me. I grew up around it. My dad was involved in it. He still is. So getting to do that on the top of the sport with a guy like BJ was incredible.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, can you dive a little deeper into that connection? Because I think that's what's, will eventually evolve the conversation into you getting into motorsports, but for filming and media. So like your dad, I thought it was a really cool story. Like your dad is a desert racer, and You got some pretty cool stories. Like, what are those?
Yeah, so like we just mentioned, my dad in the 80s and 90s rode motorcycles and dirt bikes at, major international races. I think in the late 80s he rode for the Mexican national team, actually, on a four-wheeler, desert racing back when that was a thing. Into the 90s, he was sponsored by major companies, and then in 95 or 96, he won the Baja 500 on a quad, him and his team. Fortunately, he broke his back, and he's broke his femur, and, you name it, it's probably broke, so he doesn't race that anymore. He races side-by-sides now, but I've kind of, growing up out here in Needles, it's kind of the center. It's not the center. It's in the center of like a lot of major spots. And you're not far from most of the desert racing. I've seen guys like Ivan Stewart, who's considered, the greatest of all time. I have a baby picture or a video with him on ESPN at a race in Laughlin, which is about 20 miles from here. I was on ESPN while he gave his remarks about winning the race. So I've just been around it my whole life. It's probably bred into me at this point. So going back to chasing Vegas to Reno, it was incredible. And it's something I don't think I'd really even considered up until it was actually happening at Vegas to Reno, right? Because you can't really replicate that.
Yeah. And so then working with BJ Baldwin then over at Black Rifle, and then how did that evolve? I mean, you did a few more races with him, did you? I mean, or filming with BJ.
Yeah. So Vegas to Reno, and then we came to Laughlin. A few months later, he ended up. That day is a 2-day race. It's much shorter than Vegas to Reno. It's a loop race, 2 days. The second day he ended up placing first, and then I think he was third overall for the weekend. So I had a good weekend. The next race after that was Parker, which is a couple hours from here in Arizona. He ended up winning that race, and that was his first win in several years. So that was really cool to be a part of that, get to see that happen. And then after that, I went to Silver State with him, which is a race in the middle of Nevada. He ended up winning that one, so he won two in a row. So it was a really, really good run I had with him. And I'm still very much involved with him. I'm a couple hours away. He gives me a call if he needs anything. I've been to races with him since then, even too. And I don't think that'll change once racing picks back up for him. We'll hit it again. But he's going from someone I just followed on Instagram to being someone I can consider a really good friend is pretty crazy.
That's awesome. So right now, is it slow season, or when do they start racing again?
No, right now is actually racing season, but he blew his engine, and it's just getting parts is not going good for him right now to have his engine rebuilt. So he's just waiting on that. I think he should be ready by the Mint, which is in a couple of months.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's pretty dope.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting to follow them and getting more involved now. I mean, so now it's pretty cool. Like I said, you're finding your passion for media, and now your childhood, what you grew up doing. And then when does that kind of eventually collide? What makes you get into that leap of now doing motorsports and moving into that category?
So my time at Black Rifle came to an end, and I was in San Antonio still, and a major company in racing called VP Racing Fuels. They've been around since the 70s. I would consider it like a legacy brand in racing. It's a very famous logo. I think everyone has seen it. If you look up the VP logo, you'd be like, oh, I've seen that before. They needed a media guy, and I started working with them 2 weeks after my time at Black Rifle came to an end. And so that pushed me further into motorsports, all different kinds of motorsports, not just desert racing. And I did that for a while, and then kind of just grew tired of being in San Antonio. Wanted to, spread my wings, I guess, maybe a little bit. and being out west is where all the desert racing happens. That's what I love. That's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. So I made the jump to come out here and do that more often.
Mm-hmm. So what's been the kind of the highlight now? I mean, like I said, you kind of, I don't want to say you're starting your career off, but you started with a bang, to be honest with you. I mean, like coming from like the way I started, you know, it's like slow build up. You know, you got the jump right in and, you know, working with Corridor, which is awesome. Working with Corridor, jumped the Alaska trips, BJ Baldwin, you know, how's that kind of, you know, baptism by fire worked out? I mean, you just, like I said, taking things with a fire hose and just go with that kind of schedule.
Yeah, just I mean, it comes and goes, right? Like it's not always like flowing, but I mean the highs are high and the lows aren't too low right yet. So we're just keeping it moving. But as far as like since I've been out here, I don't think I stopped until the weekend before Christmas. It's just been go nonstop almost, and we're racing again in 10 days.
Hell yeah! Which race are you doing in? Well, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll probably be a little bit after. But which one are you hitting out next?
Next one will be the Parker 400, which is in Parker, Arizona. Yeah, and then
and like in racing these things too, like they're pretty challenging though, right? I mean, like you said, like when you guys did that Vegas to Reno, how do you film that?
So now that I've done it a few times, I know how to use this program called LeadNav, which is a GPS app, and I can put the race course onto this app, and I can figure out where the road and the course are close, or where are the easy points to get to the course from the road. Obviously, because I'm not in an off-road vehicle, typically I can't. I have to use the road somehow. But I'll just spend a couple hours marking points on the course that I can get to, and if I have to like map out the off-road path to get there, I've done that as well. And it can be a little challenging because most of the time the points that you're looking at on the map you can't get to, so sometimes you just got to call audibles. Not sometimes, every time you're going to have to like think something's going to work out. It's not going to work out, so you got to either backtrack or go forward and maybe find something. You always have to have a plan B when you're doing a race, because typically, especially for me, there's guys out here videoing it who have been doing it, you know, a decade or more. So they know every course like the back of their hands. So they just go straight to the points they know are good. So, and I'm still learning that. But it goes pretty good. You gotta mark your points, you know, have your plan Bs, and then just hopefully you're in focus and exposed right when the truck goes by.
Is that pretty quick then?
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna spend like Vegas to Reno specifically. You might spend 2 or 3 hours just driving to the next point. The truck goes by, it's 5 seconds, and you're off to the next one. And you hope you can beat them. And you hope you can beat them.
So then, you see the cool helicopter shots. You were sending me some text messages. You in the helicopter. How was it rock and rolling in the helicopter?
It was fun. I wish I would have got to do it longer, but it was a lot of fun. It presents its own challenges. Obviously, you're constantly moving up there. You're moving. The car's moving. Everything's moving. So you want to be as steady as possible. And I think I did as good as you could, I think, as far as shooting without any, you know, advanced stabilization. I just had a camera sack up there, was shooting it from my lap, hanging out of there 400 feet. But it was a lot of fun. I hope I get to do it again soon.
Mm-hmm. So what's been so the guys that are actually been doing it 10, 15 years or even longer, is that a pretty tight-knit community? Now, I mean, because you're, you know, it's just like every other community, you're kind of, people start to get to know each other. Is that kind of hard to bust into, or is it, you know, because I know you're working with Metzger or what?
Josh, yeah.
I'm going to feel like an asshole. Josh, yeah, working with Josh, and I know he's pretty involved in the community for years. Kind of, not to say legendary, but almost legendary within the filmmaking side of motorsports. So, or
No, I
desert
think
racing? How is that like kind of getting into that community?
for the most part, I think everyone, if I ever have questions or like want to tag along with someone, no one's really ever had an issue with it. But I have plenty of friends now that all do the same thing, and it's not very like clicked up or anything like that. There's everyone's maybe not everyone. I'm sure there are people that don't want to help out newer people, but in my experience, it's all been good.
Mm-hmm.
And then like going back,
So yeah, running anybody like.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
I mean, going back to Josh, he's the main reason I kind of bumped out here is because he has a lot of work, and he's like, hey, I got more work than I can take. If you're out here, I'll give you some of it. And he's stayed true to that, and it's been really good for me.
That's awesome. And so how did you meet Josh?
So Josh, me being in San Antonio and BJ being in Vegas, it just didn't work out as far as like shooting all the time. So Josh and BJ got linked up. So Josh started doing his content, and that's just how we met at Parker, that first race that BJ won. So while I was still at Black Rifle, Josh would typically be in the helicopter shooting because that's what he's really good at, is using the Movi and the shot over, whatever they have. And I would be on the ground.
Nice. So then that connection paid off then.
Yeah, I think that's important. Networking and connections are going to get you a long ways anywhere, not just in this profession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's been kind of the biggest challenge of making the leap of like going into media? Like you're, like I said, it's baptism by fire, but like I said, we've talked, and I always, I'm a nerd for cameras and everything. So I appreciate when I get text message from you, like, what does this do? So what was kind of your, your, kind of the most challenging, cause everybody has their challenges. Like some people don't like editing, and in our field, it doesn't matter if you're motorsports, if you're commercial, like a lot of it, the budget shrink down. So you're, depending on what you're doing
Right.
almost everything. So what was kind of the biggest challenge for you getting into cameras, getting into editing, getting into storytelling? Like,
Yes.
Where did you struggle with, or what did you kind of,
So I think I always like kind of knew how to edit like a little bit. Obviously there's stuff in Premiere that you're never just going to know off the top of your head, but I understood it. Right. And then I've always had a thing for like putting the story in line. Like I like to edit chronologically on how the story went typically. So I think learning the camera systems is probably the hardest for me. And at Black Rifle, I started on a Black Magic, which is probably not a good thing to learn on because it's all like manual. It's not hard, but it isn't certainly not easy like a Sony or something. So learning that, definitely like, exposures and composition and all that kind of stuff was more of a learning curve than I'd say the post-production.
Mm-hmm. What's your go-to camera then for all?
Oh, right now I'm on an A7S III, but hopefully moving to an FX6. That's the goal.
Yeah. You jumping into the red format. So a lot of people are gonna be like, what the hell are they talking about? So these are different type of camera models. Reds are kind of the premier per se, but they're data hungry and they cost about $30,000 pop. So is that something that you eventually kind of want to move into, or are you just going to stick with the Sony cameras?
I don't know. I mean, just like you just mentioned, just this, the startup cost on a Red is crazy. And then there's no way to even factor in how much you're going to spend on the memory, So for me, like,
especially like for you guys, are you guys doing a lot of long takes?
Not really. No, I wouldn't say so, but still, if I edit someone else's stuff, that's Red, the files are just crazy. Like they have to send me a terabyte big hard drive for a couple of edits, and sure, like it looks great, obviously, but does it look that much better? I don't know.
Sweet, man. So then like What do you kind of see yourself going then in this field? Like, what's your next goals? Like, what's your next setup for, moving forward?
Right now, it's obviously the beginning of the year, so teams are figuring out what their budgets are for the year. But hopefully I'll be working with the team this year to go to Baja, to all the Baja races. That's the goal. I do have one in the works. Hopefully, he's just seeing what his budget is for each race, and we're going to go from there. Because that's truly my dream. Is going to Baja to chase a race. I was fortunate a few months ago to go down to Baja. I was going to pre-run the whole course with the team. Unfortunately, we blew the transmission in 100 miles, so my trip was cut a little short. But getting back down there and actually doing a race is the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then, what's your dream race then that you wanna film, or have you already done
definitely it'd be the Baja 1000. That's the longest point-to-point race in the whole world. Yeah,
Baja 1000.
The granddaddy of them all, as they say. This last one was 1,300 miles. It took the fastest guys about 21 hours. You have about 50 hours to finish it this last year. But 1,300 miles from the bottom of Baja all the way to Ensenada.
So filming that, then what's that challenge then? So you just don't sleep for 21. I shouldn't say don't sleep for 21 hours, but you're trying to get them at every point you can because it's only 21 hours. What is your goal to accomplish for that video?
Oh man, just get everything you can, I guess. And then obviously there's a lot you can shoot there, right? Because you're going to have a team of, probably 10, 20, 30, maybe 40, 50, 60 people. So there's plenty of because the truck's not going to be going by constantly. So you're going to have to either be sleeping, like you mentioned, or shooting other stuff. There's plenty of pit team stuff you could do, all the pre-running that they do, going down there and running on the race course before the race happens, so they know where the dangerous stuff is, where the turns are, etc. And then all the the post-race stuff, you could make a cool story out of it fairly easily. I think it's just going to be really time consuming.
Mm-hmm. So what's your advice for anybody that wants to get into chasing trophy trucks in the desert and filming?
I mean, it's not hard to, the barrier to entry would be your camera. And then, you got some media fees typically at each race. I would say get on Instagram and make some friends that already do it and just see what you can go from there. No one's going to say no to a free shooter, I'm sure.
Yeah, especially probably a team that's starting out.
Sure.
or someone that's new, a little green. Yeah. Hell yeah, bro. That's awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on this podcast today. Where can everybody find you and your videos?
So my professional page is redundant.media, and then my personal page, where a whole backlog of my stuff goes all the way back to high school, unfortunately. It's kurt.mcgirt.
Awesome. Well, thanks for going on, bro.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me.